Hey guys, in this quick video, I'm going to show you the right way to add contrast to your images so you get better results that feel more organic, less harsh, and more filmic overall. And I'm going to show you two techniques, one that you could do in any software, and then one that is Resolve specific, but has some really interesting results, and I've been using a lot myself lately. So let's start here in Resolve, and I'm going to start here just with the contrast slider, because this is what most people use if they want to add contrast to an image like this. So this shot is a little bit underexposed. We could see that here on the scopes. So typically what you might end up doing is just bringing up the levels. I'll bring up just the midtones here. This is kind of normally what I would do to grade this shot. And then if I were just doing it kind of the really basic traditional way, I would take the contrast slider and just boost that up until I had a kind of more aggressive contrast curve. And that creates a pretty good look. It's a good starting point, but it can tend to get a little bit harsh here in the highlights. If we were to zoom in here, you can see it's almost starting to clip here. And on another shot, that could be really problematic. There is this pivot setting as well. So this essentially just pivots the contrast to affect a different part of the image. So you can roll this back and forth a little bit and kind of find the pivot point that works for your image. And let's say for this shot, we land somewhere around here. This is fine, and I'll grab a still of this as a reference. Nothing wrong with working this way, but it's just fairly limited and often requires that if you really want to dial in the look past this point, you need to use sometimes other secondary corrections like power windows to really dial in the final product. So let's take a look at a different option here that's going to give you far more control. And this may seem basic to some people, but this is really the foundation of all good color grading when it comes to building the tone of your image and finding a really great base grade or starting point. So we're going to reset this grade here. We're back to scratch. And instead, we're just going to use the curves adjustment tool instead. And the reason we're doing this is because this is kind of a more non-linear way of working. When you simply use the contrast slider, you're just adding overall contrast. The black and white points are moving in equal measure, and then you really only have control over that pivot like we looked at before. But when you're working with a custom curves adjustment, you have so much more granular control. So on a shot like this, I'm going to start by making a point here on the curve, and typically I would recommend looking for somewhere that would be in your middle gray range. There are tools that will show you exactly how to find that on a shot-by-shot basis, but in this case, I'm just going to click roughly by eye here in kind of the mid-range based on how I'm seeing the levels represented here. And I'm going to pull this up a little bit because I'm focusing kind of on her skin tones. I'm just trying to get those a little bit brighter and looking a little bit more kind of dynamic. So now I'm going to add another point here, and I'm going to brighten up the highlights a touch as well, just so it feels natural. We don't want it having too much of an HDR look that can feel kind of over processed and over synthetic. And then I'm actually going to take the highlights here and just roll them off. So there's not really a lot of clipping going on here. This isn't going to make a huge adjustment on this particular shot, but just out of force of habit, this is typically a pretty nice contrast curve. Now you may want to crush your shadows a little bit more. In this case, the shadows are already sitting pretty low here, but if we want to go a little bit more aggressive with them, we can grab a point here and pull it down. And now we're getting a really nice contrasty look. And again, if we want, the sky's the limit, we can really continue to customize this, perhaps by taking the darkest black levels and shadows here and just lifting them up just slightly so it gives us kind of that filmic feel. So let's grab another screenshot here. We'll take a look at that still, and we'll compare that with what we had before. So the first shot and the first pass that we did here feels just brighter overall and actually less contrasty, even though we cranked up the contrast dial a fair amount. This feels a lot more rich, and we're bringing some interesting saturation into the image as well by creating a slightly more nuanced contrast curve that's really optimized for this specific shot, as opposed to just kind of a blanket general contrast increase overall. But now I want to show you a third method. So let's save this as sort of our first and second look, and I'll show you a third method now. I've seen this pop up a lot on different people's YouTube videos. Other colorists are using this tactic, and it's pretty effective. I've been using it myself. So you go and Resolve. This is a Resolve specific thing. I should mention everything else I've talked about so far in principle can apply in Final Cut or Premiere or any other software. But right here in Resolve, if we want to take the glow effect and drop that on top of our serial node, we can go to the top here And we're actually going to take the shine threshold and pull it all the way down to 0. This is going to look a little funny for a second. We're going to take the spread and pull that down to 0 as well. And then we're going to change the composite mode as well. So right now the composite type is set to add, and we're going to go to soft light. So that's going to kind of bring the exposure back down. Now, without doing anything else, I'm just going to toggle this on and off, and I'll go full screen so you can see what this is doing. But this is making a really interesting effect right off the bat. It is simultaneously boosting our contrast, increasing a little bit of saturation into the right areas like the midtones, and it's also brightening up the image in the areas that we want, like the mid-range. So this isn't a perfect final image yet, but if we want to fine tune it a little bit more, we can go here into our qualifier and just work with the luminance values. So we'll take the high soft setting and turn this up, and then we'll take the high setting here and turn this down a little bit just until it starts looking right for us. So I'm gonna go to about this point. I'm just looking here at the white color on her dress and making sure that it doesn't look too overexposed, but also not too underexposed. And then from here, I might boost up the overall level. And I could do this either with my lift gamma gain adjustments or just with another simple curves adjustment. So this is just basic exposure just to bring us back into some more kind of neutral territory. And this is a really interesting kind of high contrast, heavier look. So let me take a still of this as well. And now we can compare them. So here's our current shot that we're working on where we're adding contrast with the glow tool and we're getting that heavier, richer look. It's actually adding a lot of density and weight to the image as well. Here is what we had before. This is our curves adjustment. So it's looking pretty good. It's a little bit flatter and it's a little bit of a less aggressive look, but it still looks good. We've still been able to really fine tune that. And here's our first attempt at grading the shot just with a basic curves adjustment. And I'll pull that off even so you can see this is the original that we were dealing with. So that's the most raw looking. And then of course, here is where we landed once we added that glow effect to the shot. So overall, I really like this look. If you do have Resolve, I would certainly consider using this glow effect as kind of a quick way to add a really dynamic amount of contrast to your shot without having to use power windows or other secondaries, which can look a little bit more synthetic, especially if you're layering too many on top of each other. In general, my philosophy as a colorist and my approach is always to try to emulate the analog process. I always love just how much can be done with film in just a motion picture development process, just with chemical baths and tinting and different processing and scanning techniques. And as much as you can do just with a simple adjustment without using secondaries, without using additional corrections is always going to help you in terms of saving time and creating more consistent looks that you can take and apply to other shots. So hopefully this is helpful for those of you trying to improve your color skills a little bit, particularly the basics when it comes to adding contrast and just finding the best possible base grade for your shot. No matter what software you're using, it's always just good practice to either use color curves or individual adjustments, even with your lift, gamma, and gain settings, or whatever tool you may have at your disposal to do anything but what the bare minimum is, which is simply applying blanket contrast to your shot and then hoping that that makes it somehow magically look better. You want to really get nuanced with your contrast control to get the most polished final result. And if you're in DaVinci, definitely try this glow technique. It's been floating around. It's a really great one. And it's something, like I said, that I'm personally integrating into my workflow a lot moving forward. So if you guys enjoyed this, please be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have tons more videos like this coming out soon, and stay tuned for more from us then.